Every year, we as football fans come together to argue about the size of a 20-year-old's hands or arms, the maturity of people we've never even met, and the skill level of some of the best athletes in the whole world. But that's what draft time's all about, baby. Everyone's got hot takes, everyone has opinions, and there's always something to discuss. Big issues and small issues alike. But after spending all of this time arguing about draft prospects, I rarely see anybody come back and revisit these old debates. Sewell versus Chase, Malik Willis in the first round, Patrick Surtain versus J.C. Horn. Who is going to declare the victors of these debates? Well, that's what I want to do with this series. I want to create a snapshot in time of some of the most heated debates and common stories during the draft season. The position battles, the media narratives, the players held back by an overwhelming flaw, and revisit them later on, maybe even multiple times, so that we as a community can remember what we once fought so valiantly for on Twitter, and to brag when we were right, and to pretend we never said anything wrong, because we could never be wrong. I'm going to present every issue as objectively as possible, so that later down the line we could revisit all the topics together and see the arguments that were made on both sides. I cannot stress enough that anything I say about the players in this specific video is not my opinion. They are storylines or player concerns I've gathered from research or from what I've heard from my hours of listening to NFL podcasts in all my free time. But let's not waste any more time. Let's talk ball.
The stars are aligning for Cam Ward to go from 0-star prospect and then going number 1 overall in the draft. It's an insane story.
Everybody said that Cam Ward was getting day 3 grades entering this past season. He is viewed as an absolute boom or bust type of a prospect.
I think he is a boom or bust type of prospect. I think he has the ability to create special plays inside the pocket, outside the pocket. Certainly has the ability to make those hero ball plays that you just want to eliminate from his game.
Although it was once a 2-horse race, Cam Ward has locked up his spot as quarterback 1, and at the time of this recording, he finds himself as the number 1 ranked player on the consensus big board and is projected to go number 1 overall in 93% of mock drafts. But this was not an expected result this time last year. You see, unlike last year where Caleb Williams was hailed as the future number 1 overall pick from the moment he stepped onto a college football field, the same cannot be said about Cam Ward, who started his college football journey as a 0-star recruit at Incarnate Word and has worked his way up to number 1 overall after 5 seasons, 57 games, and 3 different teams. To show how much of a surprise this was, let's look back as recently as last year. Ward actually declared for the 2024 draft and was projected as a late day 2 pick before deciding to withdraw and transfer to Miami. This late day 2 ranking stuck until the 2024 season started, as Ward was not seen as a contender for the number 1 overall pick, finding himself consistently ranked outside of the top 5 quarterbacks in way too early quarterback rankings. But that changed rather quickly and for good reason. In 2024, Cam Ward showed that he has the tools and processing ability to be an elite quarterback at the NFL level. In terms of tools, he has the arm strength to make most throws on the field and to rip the ball into tight windows, and he has the athleticism to make defenders miss in the backfield and to extend plays. Alongside the athleticism and arm strength, he shows great ability to throw off platform and throw from different arm angles, opening up a wide variety of throws, whether it be the schemed up throw or one made in the scramble drill late in the down. In terms of processing, he's quick and decisive reading the field, and he makes throws with anticipation, ripping throws before wide receivers hit their break in order to get the ball in between quick closing zone windows and tight man coverage. But despite his meteoric rise and all-pro potential, Ward is not considered a safe prospect by any stretch of the imagination, being characterized by many as a boom or bust type of prospect who could either be a perennial all-pro or an absolute whiff. This comes down to Ward's aggressive, gunslinging playstyle. Ward loves to play hero ball, at times ignoring easy design plays and structure and holding onto the ball to wait for a big play to develop, as evidenced by his 2.9. He is also an aggressive decision maker who takes a lot of risks. Although this can lead to some amazing tight window throws, it also leads to some baffling turnovers where he's throwing into double or triple coverage. Outside of the gunslinging part, his accuracy and ball placement are very inconsistent, both in structure and out of structure, so even when he does make the right decisions, accuracy concerns lead to Cam Ward's biggest question: will he boom or will he bust? Can he reel himself in enough to play in structure when needed while still creating and making amazing throws out of structure, or will he struggle to convert the layups enough to stay on the field as a team's quarterback?
To take him in the top 2 is just too rich.
I would feel pretty uncomfortable spending a top 5 pick on him because I just think the physical traits limit him from being a top 10 caliber quarterback.
Now all of a sudden he's too short, he's too slow. The fastest quarterback that's in the Hall of Fame is who? When it comes to a quarterback, I want to know what's in here and I want to know what's in there.
If you cut the film on and you block out all of the outside noise, he plays the position like the position is supposed to be played. All of these things that we've applauded by quarterbacks that have won tons of games in the NFL, Shadur Sanders has those.
Shedeur Sanders at this point is being evaluated as a guy who, while good, is not slam dunk. He's going to change your franchise.
Superstar.
There may be some limitations here.
Exactly.
Where if you take him number 3 overall, you've wasted that number.
Unlike last year, there's a pretty clear consensus quarterback too, and that's Shedeur Sanders, the infamous son of Deion Sanders. Ignoring the Deion of it all, the reports on Shedeur as of late are practically all in agreement. In contrast with Ward, who has a high ceiling and a low floor, Sanders is considered to be a guy with a low ceiling but a high floor. Shedeur's strengths are his repeatable mechanics, leading to consistent accuracy and ball placement to make throws into tight windows, as well as his ability to operate in structure to consistently put his wide receivers in a position to succeed on throws under 10 yards. But the question many are asking is, how highly will this skill set be valued in the draft? Despite the hype, consensus sees Shedeur as a game manager, an average athlete with at best an average arm who holds the ball too long, struggles to evade sacks, and can't consistently make throws late in the down or off platform outside of the pocket. The majority of consensus agrees that he isn't a first round value because he doesn't have the tools to create outside of the designed play or to elevate the situation around him, and he didn't show the ability to consistently operate beyond 10 yards, as evidenced by the fact that only 44.4% of his completions were more than 10 yards over the last 2 seasons, ranking 101 in the FBS. But despite these questions, 44% of mock drafts have Shedeur going to the Giants at number 3, mostly as a result of the Giants' desperate need for a quarterback and the weakness of this quarterback class as a whole. It's actually really fascinating how often you watch a mock draft with this pick in it and hear the person saying, I don't believe Shedeur's worth this pick, or I would never make this pick, similar to the Malik Willis pick in mock drafts just a few weeks ago. Some argue that without Deion's backing, Shedeur would be an easy 2nd or 3rd round pick based on his tape. But others argue that, regardless of his hype off the field, Shedeur is a high IQ, consistently accurate rhythm passer, which is historically a type of quarterback that the NFL has taken in the top 10 and has succeeded at the NFL level. They also argue that even if Shedeur maybe has a 2nd round grade, quarterbacks are at a premium, and many quarterbacks who have 2nd round grades often go in the top of the 1st round, so that doesn't stop Shedeur from going in the top of the 1st round. But this leads us to our questions. Will Shedeur be taken in the top 5? Will he play at such a level as to be worth that pick? And lastly, does he have as high of a floor as consensus scouts believe? Alabama quarterback Jalen Milroe is another prospect that consensus views as a boom or bust type because of the extremes in his game. On one end, Milroe has elite tools with a strong arm to chuck passes down the field, and 4.3 was once GPS tracked as running faster than former Alabama teammate Jahmyr Gibbs. On the other hand, Milroe's accuracy profile throwing the ball is concerning. According to Corey Kinnan of DaftOnDraft.Football, over the last 3 years, Milroe's weighted on target percentage in the short game is 2nd worst. He doesn't fare much better at other areas of the field either, as according to PFF, Milroe's rate of uncatchable passes thrown to the intermediate areas of the field, between 5 and 20 yards, was 30.1%. 4th worst among eligible draft quarterbacks, and his 33.1% uncatchable pass rate was almost 4% lower than the next worst player. These concerns have led fans to raise the age-old question, why not just move him to running back? And this is not a new development either. The position switch question has existed for several years for Milroe, even dating back to Alabama, where coaches and fans alike suggested that he switch to running back. But Milroe's been persistent. Whether it be years ago or now, whenever he's been asked to change positions, he has said that he is a quarterback through and through. Many consensus scouts agree, arguing that if he could just fix his accuracy to consistently hit the easy stuff and have even just average accuracy overall at every other area of the field, he could spearhead an elite offense. The idea being that he'd dominate in the ground game and would be able to convert easy throws that are opened up as a result of defenses overcompensating for the threat of his rushing ability. Those who like this option for Milroe point to Milroe's character and background being raised in a military family, saying that, with his work ethic, he'll be able to develop the mechanics and overall accuracy enough to show that he's a quarterback that's also an athlete, or will he remain just an athlete who struggles to be a quarterback? At QB3 is someone who's recently risen quite a lot in the process, going from a day 2 projection to a late 1st rounder, and now some are even projecting him in the early 1st round. We're talking about Ole Miss quarterback Jaxson Dart. To be completely honest with you, opinions vary widely on Jaxson Dart as a whole. People really disagree as to many things with his tape. Some reports say he has great arm strength, others average, and others below average. Some reports say that he's great at throwing with anticipation, others say that he struggles to do that. Some reports say he's a great deep ball thrower, and others say that he struggles to accurately throw the deep ball. So it's a little hard to tell you his consensus strengths, other than his advanced statistics paint him as a very good deep ball thrower. His 25.4 explosive play rate was first in the FBS, he had an 11.9 average depth of target, 17 touchdowns on passes of 20 plus yards, and a 92.6 passing grade on deep throws. But what practically 99% of scouting reports on Jaxson Dart do have as a weakness is his inexperience operating a pro-style offense. Ole Miss's offense, schemed up by Lane Kiffin, rarely ever required Dart to make full field reads or play under center. Instead, Dart would take snaps from the shotgun and would primarily be tasked with throwing RPOs, reading a conflict defender on a half-field read, or throwing deep to his wide receivers who had a one-on-one. What this essentially did is simplified the offense for him in terms of processing and difficult throws. No need to progress to a backside dig, rarely the need to anticipate throws coming open, and no need to make difficult tight windowed throws. The sample size of plays where any scout can see Dart go through his reads and operate a pro-style passing concept is super small. So it's not necessarily that consensus says he's bad at it, it's more that it's just completely unknown, similar to Hendon Hooker from a few years ago coming out of the Tennessee offense. Although many reports do say that, in the few situations he was tasked with moving to his second read or reading out a full field concept, he wasn't particularly good. This is supported by his PFF grades, as throwing to his first read, Dart had the second highest PFF passing grade in college football with a 92.9, but when forced to move off his first read, his PFF passing grade dropped to a 60.3, ranking 63rd. Ultimately, the question for Dart is whether he'll be able to operate an NFL-level offense. This running back draft class is considered to be a deep class, but despite having a lot of talent, there's a clear number one at the top of the board. Boise State running back Ashton Jeanty. The first thing you'll hear about Genty is how amazing his contact balance is, and it's completely true. In addition to his elite vision and excellent reactionary quickness to make defenders miss at all areas of the field, Genty is just so hard for defenders to bring down because he's constantly bouncing off of them. In my own scouting report of Genty, I described him as a full body runner because of his ability to create separation with stiff arms, force missed tackles with his body positioning, and his elite intelligence and feel for the position as a whole. Consensus agrees with me, and quite honestly, there are very few true weaknesses in his game when you watch the tape. His overall skill set is what led to him having such an incredible year. Genty forced 151 missed tackles in 2024, breaking the college football record previously set by Bijan Robinson, who had 47 less with 104. He also shattered the record for yards after contact with 1,970, beating out the old record set by Jonathan Taylor, who had 1,355, a difference of 615 yards. Genty's elusiveness rating was also 215.1, which was the first in the nation by a massive margin. The guy in second, Ahmad Hardy of LA Monroe, had an elusiveness rating of 176.3. All of this ability to create his own yards resulted in an incredible 2024 season with 2,601 yards on 374 carries, a yards per carry of 7, and 29 touchdowns. Although he finished second in the Heisman voting behind Travis Hunter, he took home the Doak Walker Award, the Maxwell Award, and the MWC Offensive Player of the Year, as well as being named a consensus All-American. The only real questions with Genty are about how his tape will transfer to the next level and his value as a whole. At 5'8", 211, Genty is in the 14th percentile for height and the 43rd percentile for weight. Although he appears rocked up, there are some concerns from consensus that his ability to break tackles won't transfer to the next level. In arguing this point, many point to Genty's game against Penn State, where he only averaged 3.5 yards per carry. I would personally say that if you watch the All-22, he clearly played much better than his stats showed, but this video is not about my opinion, so it remains a question from consensus nonetheless. Of course, with an elite running back prospect, always comes a question of their value. Although we discussed the same issue with Bijan Robinson 2 years ago, the running back saga continues now after we've seen the explosion of Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan onto the scene, as well as the dynamic impact Saquon, Derrick Henry, and Josh Jacobs have made to their new teams after they were allowed to walk in free agency. Many argue that it's still better to take a premium position early in the first round, especially in this draft class where it's really deep at running back and a team could get a great player at running back in later rounds and get a premium player at a premium position in the first round. But others argue that Genty is just that good of a player, he's worth a top 10 pick, even in a deep running back class. And that's why we have this video, to save the questions and revisit them for later. 1. Will Genty's generational talents transfer to the next level? And 2. Where will he be picked, and will his level of play in the NFL show to be worth that pick as a whole?
He is definitely the top receiver in the draft. If there's anything he should be in the NFL, it's receiver.
I like him at corner. Theoretically, I think it's maybe a little bit easier to be a full-time corner and then get 25 snaps a game on offense.
I think he goes as a corner.
Travis Hunter would play wide receiver for me.
We would see him as a receiver primarily first.
Probably starts at corner, and then you find ways to interject him into the offense as he gets more comfortable.
I do think he's going to play both ways. There is a path to play both ways that doesn't ruin him physically.
He can legitimately play both at the pro level.
You can't, because you got to be in defensive meetings, offensive meetings. Like, you can't be two places at one time.
You had to know this one was going to be on here. Arguably the biggest talking point of any draft ever, Travis Hunter, cornerback or wide receiver. Although I'll still have graphics of articles, no human has the amount of time it would take to accurately sum up consensus's feelings and sub-talking points on this issue. And the talking points basically boil down to a choice of 6 options. 1. Playing just cornerback. 2. Playing just receiver. 3. Playing cornerback with some snaps at receiver. 4. Playing wide receiver with some snaps at corner. 5. Playing 50-50 on both sides. Or 6. Playing both sides full time. Let's briefly look at the pros and cons, starting with options 1 and 2. Playing just cornerback or playing just wide receiver. In general, the pros are that Hunter will be able to develop a full skill set at one position and will have a better opportunity to hit his upside at that position because he won't be tasked with learning double the plays, learning extra technique, going to double the position meetings, and having to play double the amount of snaps, which causes injury risk and exhaustion. The cons are that you're taking a potentially elite player off one side of the ball, and there's always the what if as to whether he would have been an even better player on the other side. But to be more specific, let's talk now about playing just cornerback versus just playing wide receiver. The argument for playing just cornerback is that prospects with Hunter's ball skills and athleticism are not usually corners, so it'd be hard to find someone with this much potential to be a lockdown corner. Because his skill set is so rare, a team might prefer to have him devote his time to meeting that upside at corner instead of dabbling in wide receiver where his skill set is much more common. So in theory, the argument is that you want him to fill the role that might otherwise be more difficult to find. Cornerback is also a position that's much less play call dependent and teammate dependent, so with Hunter's upside to be a superstar corner, it makes more sense to put him at cornerback and let him lock down receivers rather than having him on offense where his upside may be limited by whoever is throwing him the ball or the play calling. Looking at the arguments now for just playing receiver, first, although it's easier to find a receiver that matches Hunter's wide receiver skill set, that doesn't mean you take it for granted. Easier doesn't mean easy, it's relative. And he has the potential to be a superstar receiver, which may be more valuable to a team in an offensive-driven league. And it very well might make him more money due to the market for the positions. Although wide receiver is definitely a bit more play call and teammate dependent, if Hunter's on offense, you could always choose to get the ball into his hands and force a defense to stop him. But if he's on defense, opposing teams could scheme around Hunter by not throwing the ball in his direction, lessening his value, and also making you feel like a dope for having a wide receiver out there running laps for no reason when he could be contributing on offense. Also, cornerback is a position known for year-to-year variance, and playing at wide receiver would allow Hunter to make a more consistent positive impact to the team. But we're not limited by absolutes, so let's look at options 3 and 4, the 80-20 or 75-25 arguments. In general, either of these options give Hunter the ability to contribute on both sides of the ball, while mitigating injury risk and lessening the amount of time he needs to spend on his secondary position, basically making it easier for him to hit his upside and play at full strength. These options may very well let Hunter develop into an elite player at one position while giving you a very good player at another. There are a lot of general cons though. What if you play him at the wrong primary position first? Now you've just slowed his development at his best position. What if you struggle to put him in at the right times during the game? What if when he's off the field, whoever's replacing him is significantly worse and gives up a huge play or makes a mistake? What if there are more penalties for substitution errors due to confusing personnel packages? What if he doesn't get to spend as much time at one position, so then he's just straight up bad at it, and or he's not as good as a more developed player on your team who has less upside? What if the experiment fails? Now you've wasted development time at a position he'll likely just stop playing. What if you can't properly utilize his skill set? What if you can't get him in on either side of the ball without telegraphing to the opposing team what type of play you'll run? Should I draft him in fantasy football? As for the specific options themselves, it's been debated which of these two options makes more sense logistically, but here's what it probably looks like. If he were to play mainly cornerback, he'd sub in at wide receiver on obvious passing downs, 2-minute drill situations, and maybe the red zone. If he were to play at mainly wide receiver and sub in at cornerback, he'd come in on obvious passing downs, 2-minute drill situations, and maybe the red zone. The problem with the latter option is that when he's off the field, you'd need 2 boundary corners. So then when he comes on the field, he's kicking one of your boundary corners into the slot or just putting them onto the sideline. Although the same dynamic is present on offense, Hunter can play as a slot wide receiver, but isn't considered to be a slot cornerback and wouldn't be utilized to his full potential as a slot corner. Teams realizing any strategy to put in Hunter can also no huddle and try to snap the ball quickly to prevent him from getting in, whereas on offense, you dictate the pace, so it's easier to get that done. There are even more scheme and personnel related things to build on there, but we've probably hit enough of it to move on to option number 5, which is playing half the snaps on both sides. This one's pretty quick because it's mostly the same stuff that we just discussed with the same pros and cons. Pros being that he could contribute the full game during high leverage situations and have less of a workload and injury risk. Cons are what happens when backups are in for him on plays that he otherwise would have been in, slowing development time, having to adjust personnel packages and team building for him, and concerns with making sure that you're using him right and actually choose correctly when to have him in and when to not have him in. Lastly, we have playing both sides of the ball full time, which obviously comes with the most questions, but Hunter himself has stated that he wants to do it. What are the pros? Well, everything really. Assuming he plays at his maximum ceiling at both positions, you would get an all-pro at 2 separate positions from one player. He'd be known as a generational talent with a skill set never seen in the NFL, and he'd get paid millions, and everyone would live happily ever after. So what could possibly be the downside? Well, there are so many. First is the injury risk. Playing more snaps means more risk of an injury, and more injuries equals less practice time, hurting his ability to develop his technique on both sides of the ball and hampered athleticism. Also, if he gets hurt, you now lose a starter at 2 different positions. On the point about developing technique, splitting time will make learning the nuances of each position slower if he's even able to fully learn them. Slower development may delay his ability to hit his full upside, or may limit his peak performance to only a few years where his technique and his athletic peaks combine. He'll also likely be playing tired on both sides of the ball and will be beat up from the increased physicality, so it'll be hard to play at a ceiling on an every down basis at both positions, again meaning he's not hitting his full ceiling at either position. We also need to talk about the mental side of the game. It'll be difficult to be in team meetings on both sides of the ball, learn the offensive and defensive playbooks, and meet the demands of multiple position coaches. Even if they do work out a way to schedule everything so that he can know everything he needs to know, he'll be facing an uphill battle in terms of remembering all of the plays, while trying to work on his technique, while trying to work on the little things like team chemistry. Think of all of those chemistry balls with Rodgers and Devontae Adams. That stuff comes from working constantly with your teammates, and he just won't have as much time to do that. This workload could slow his development further, and also lead to busted plays on both sides of the ball. But we also need to talk about the mental demands off the field too. In other words, the risk of completely burning out. Trying to learn so many things physically and mentally in a new environment with the expectations that come of a top 5 first-round pick is exhausting on its own, not even considering the fact that he's in his early 20s and has a life outside of football. It'll no doubt be difficult to maintain a work-life balance and handle the stress of the expectations while trying to do all of the things that we discussed. So what does he have to gain by playing both sides? Everything. What does he have to lose? Everything. Given Hunter's track record at the college level, it's really not impossible. In 2024, Hunter won the Heisman, the Walter Camp Award, won awards for being the best defensive player and best wide receiver, and won AP Player of the Year. As a wide receiver, he put together a 96 reception, 1,258-yard campaign, both 4th, had 15 touchdowns, which was 2nd, forced 24 missed tackles, which was 7th, and had a 142.4 passer rating when targeted, which was 1st. As a cornerback, his 90.3 coverage grade was the 3rd highest. He had 11 PBUs, 4 interceptions, a 39.9 passer rating when targeted, which was 8th best, 9.9 snaps per target, which was 4th best, and a forced fumble. And he did all of this playing almost 1,500 snaps at a rate of about 85% of the snaps on each side of the ball. It's insane to see someone get this opportunity because it may never come again. A player who would be a top 10 draft pick regardless of their position. And I'm really excited to see how it works out. But for right now, it remains a question for us to revisit later. Let's take a short break and go over the best names in the 2025 NFL Draft. Bashaw Tootin, Shitazilla, Money Parks, G, Scott Jr., Torricelli Simpkins, Bryce, your cable's due, Javantez Spraggins, Issa Pole, Octavius Oxendine, Devon J. Thomas, Tonka Hemingway, Aeneas Peebles, Chaz Chimbliss, Bam! Martin Scott, Isis Waxter, Robert Longerbeam, Yam Banks, Major Burns, Shaquan Loyal. Which one's your favorite? Let me know below. Although some have Travis Hunter as their wide receiver 1, many argue about who are the top wide receivers in this class outside of Hunter. Generally, the debate is between Missouri's Luther Burden, Tetairoa McMillan of Arizona, or Matthew Golden of Texas. But each of them have their own storylines attached to them, so other than revisiting who will be the best of the three, it's also important to talk about them individually. So let's do so, starting with Luther Burden. After his 2023 campaign with 86 receptions for 1,212 yards and 9 touchdowns, Burden was a lock to be a top 10 draft pick. With his level of explosiveness and excellent ball skills, he seemed like he'd be the next Jamar Chase or Malik Neighbors. But his 2023 10.3 yards after catch per attempt dropped to 6.1 in 2024, and his yards per reception dropped from 14.1 to 11.1. With a disappointing end to 2024, Burden finds himself falling down draft boards. Some argue that he didn't look like the same guy on tape, saying he was less explosive before and after the catch, he ran a limited route tree, and his effort was poor. Others argue that the lack of production is context-driven, pointing to a hand injury for Missouri's quarterback, more focus on Burden from defenses, and the offense's failure to target him outside of throwing him the ball behind the line of scrimmage. Regardless of the reasons, he seemed to be falling outside of the top 10 anyways. But what was once a fall from wide receiver 1 in the top 10 to wide receiver 2 or 3 in the top 20 is now potentially a fall out of the first round entirely, as recent mock drafts from Mel Kiper, Daniel Jeremiah, Dane Brugler, and Todd McShay all have Burden outside of the first round. The reason for the continual fall is supposedly character concerns. Albert Breer said that Burden, quote, isn't the cleanest prospect, end quote, and Todd McShay said, quote, there's a lot of diva, end quote. But the most damning report came from Bob McGinn, relaying the words of an anonymous scout who basically said that Burden was entitled, had poor influences surrounding him, and was not a hard worker in practice or off the field. On the other end, as Rock M Nation points out, this is an anonymous source, and no one has verified any of these reports or can point to anything specific. Burden's head coach at Missouri came to his defense as well, citing to the fact that Burden has no past incidents and stating that Burden is a great teammate. So no one knows if there are really concerns about his character or if this is just a media talking point, but what people do know is that Burden's production on the field doesn't match the level of prospect he was once seen to be, and many consensus scouts are concerned that he won't be able to hit his upside for various reasons. So that's the question for him. In the NFL, will Burden be more like the 2023 Luther Burden or more like the 2024 Luther Burden? Tet McMillan came into the year as the second wide receiver behind Burden, but there seems to have been some prospect fatigue on him as of late, as he's recently been falling to the 15s through 20s in mock drafts rather than being picked in the top 10 like he used to be. The best part of Tet McMillan's game is his combination of size, movement ability relative to his size, and ball skills. At 6'5", 219, McMillan is in the 94th percentile for height and 87th percentile for weight. This may make you think that McMillan is this N'Keal Harry type of player who sucks at moving but wins at the catch point, and you'd only be half right. McMillan does have incredible ball skills, evidenced by the amazing catches he makes on tape, and is about 5% drop rate in college on over 300 targets. But you'd be wrong about the movement ability, because McMillan is actually kind of a beast after the catch. He was second in the nation in missed tackles forced, only to Luther Burden, and he did an excellent job in college of making defenders miss in space, running through arm tackles, and using his long strides to eat up ground quickly and get past defenders. But despite all of these excellent traits, there are concerns about McMillan's ability to separate against man coverage specifically and to work against press. As a bigger guy, it's harder for him to operate in the short areas, making it hard for him to create space at the line of scrimmage and escape a cornerback's jam. Also, the fact that he's bigger means that cornerbacks have a larger target to hit, making it further difficult for him to separate right off the line of scrimmage. But even during routes, many point to his struggles against man coverage, where McMillan finished in the 39th percentile in separation. So the question for Tet is whether he can be a consistent separator against man coverage at the NFL level. Lastly, we have Matthew Golden. If you knew absolutely nothing about Matthew Golden and just looked at the way that people talk about him after the combine, you might group him in your mind with prospects who fit into the deep threat or weapon type categories, and that's how people seem to talk about him now. In many places when you hear people talking about him, they're referencing the fact that he ran a 4.29 40-yard dash and he is this elite speed guy. But it wasn't that way for practically the entire draft process up to the combine. You see, before the combine, most were in agreement on Golden's speed. He was more of a quicker than fast type of guy who accelerated really quickly but lacked the top end speed to consistently beat defenses over the top or to outrun defenses after the catch. But after the 4.29 40-yard dash, consensus went scrambling back to the tape, and now we're left with a divide. Some have changed their opinion, saying that he looks like a 4.29 player on tape. Some have accepted that the tape doesn't show the 4.2 speed, but point to the fact that he's newer at the position and had an X-wide receiver role, so he probably wasn't playing full speed. And yet others just flat out disagree with the whole thing, arguing that Golden both doesn't show the 4.2 speed on tape and doesn't have 4.2 speed in the tank. There are various examples that are often pointed to, but the most common one is Golden's run after catch against Arizona State, where he fails to outrun the defense. Some analysts have gone so far as to analyze the 40-yard dash time frame by frame, arguing that the 4.29 40-yard dash was a result of a timing error. This discussion has gotten so prevalent that Golden has even felt the need to weigh in himself, responding to a tweet about his speed, stating, quote, "Go fuck yourself, pal," end quote. Regardless, this whole speed debate has made people lose sight of what makes Golden a really great wide receiver prospect, which is his borderline elite ball skills outside of some focus drops, his explosive short area quickness off the line of scrimmage and in his routes, and his versatility to line up as an X, a Z, or a slot, and to win at all areas of the field. So to be clear, Golden is not just a speed guy like John Ross or Jalen Hyatt, he's much more of a polished prospect who happens to have run a 4.29 40. Maybe. But that's the question. Does he have elite speed, and can he use it at the NFL level? Similar to running backs, when a tight end is considered one of the best players in the draft, there are always concerns about the value of picking them in the top 10, and these conversations become heavily dependent on recency bias. For example, after Kyle Pitts was picked at number 4 and flamed out with the Falcons, Brock Bowers fell all the way to the Raiders at number 13, despite being considered one of the top 5 players in the draft. After Bowers' historic rookie season, there are questions about whether the NFL will again overcorrect and take a tight end in the top 10. This year, that guy is generally considered to be Penn State tight end Tyler Warren, although consensus is not in complete agreement, as some do prefer Colston Loveland. The reason Warren is widely considered a top 10 pick is because of his versatility and mentality. In terms of versatility, Warren has the size, speed, and strength to be an offensive weapon with the ball in his hands while still being a good, if not great, blocker in the run game. As a receiver, Warren's 1,233 yards was 7th in the nation, and his 104 receptions were 2nd. When we look at qualifying receivers and tight ends, of which there are 92 total, his 6.7 yards after catch per reception was 17th, his 19 missed tackles forced was 19th, his contested catch rate of 61.9% was 18th, and his 93.4 receiving grade was 2nd. If we were to change the rankings to just tight ends, he'd be 2nd or 1st in all of those categories. But at 6'5", 260, 78th, and 66th percentiles respectively, Warren also has the size and strength to be an excellent blocker. He's still a little bit raw fundamentally as a blocker, but he shows the effort to block, and once he puts that together, he'll be the type of tight end who can line up anywhere and do anything. Of course, the question comes back to whether or not a do-it-all tight end is worth a top 10 pick. So it'll be interesting to see. Will it be the next Bowers or Kyle Pitts?
For 2 years, nobody had any measurements on me, and nobody said anything about my play. So now all of a sudden, an arm length decides if I'm a good player or not. I think it's BS. You know, any decision makers in the NFL, they don't really care. It's all, people who don't coach, and they don't coach for a reason.
The big discussion, if anyone's been paying attention to the draft, is he a tackle? Is he a guard? He measured in with 33 inches or just below that, depending on what you're going to go with. Do you think he can stay out at tackle?
Well, he's 33-inch arms. I certainly wouldn't want to have a tackle that has 31 and change arms or 32 and low change arms, but I think he would be okay to give him a chance.
Will Campbell, is he a tackle? Is he a guard? Is he worth the top 10 pick? Where do you stand on Will Campbell from LSU?
He's a guard. It's a guard. It shows up on tape the fact that he has these tight shoulders and shorter arms for attack. He would have the shortest wingspan in the NFL at tackle position. That's a worry. And so I would rather have him a guard because I think he'd be an awesome guard.
Death, taxes, and questioning the arm length of offensive linemen. It's one of the nation's favorite pastimes, and it's no different this year. Like Peter Skoronski and Graham Barton before him, Will Campbell is the contender this year for the annual tackle guard debate. Campbell, a 3-year starter at left tackle for LSU, is known for his football IQ, leadership, sound mechanics, and excellent balance between athleticism and power for an offensive lineman. But despite holding the OT1 spot from September to the Combine, many consensus analysts have not only dropped Campbell down to OT2 behind Armand Membu of Missouri, but some have removed him from their offensive tackle board entirely, believing that he'd be a guard at the NFL level. Although there are some that have different reasons, the debate as to whether Will Campbell should be a tackle or guard at the NFL level is mostly based on his poor arm length and wingspan. At the Combine, Campbell measured in with 32 and 5/8 inch arms, which, if true, would be in the 11th percentile for offensive tackles, and his full wingspan measured in at 77 and 3/8, which, if true, would be the shortest wingspan measured at the Combine since 2011. Notice I said if true. That's because we've had a fascinating year in terms of measurement discrepancy between the All-Star Bowls, the Combine, and Pro Days. Despite the fact that NFL scouts do the measuring at all of these events, the measurements are wildly inconsistent. For example, Jalen Milroe's hand apparently grew half an inch in 1 month. In Campbell's case, he measured in with 33-inch arms at his Pro Day, which meets the threshold test that is usually used by scouts, with rare exceptions. Okay, so now he's a tackle again, right? Not quite. To put it really quickly and simply, arm length is very important to tackles for multiple reasons. One, because when offensive tackles have long arms, it helps them to make first contact with a pass rusher, allowing them to take momentum out of the defender's rush and control the rep, rather than letting the defender get into their pads and drive them backwards. Two, because as a tackle, you have a lot more space to cover than a guard, so if you have longer arms, you have a better chance of using your arm length to keep a defender in front of you. The reason why everyone wants to move short-armed players into guard is because as a guard, you have less space to cover, therefore you don't need as long of arms, and you can also just carry more weight in your lower half since you don't need to be as agile, allowing you to more easily sit down on power rushers who do get into your chest. If you're a short-armed offensive tackle, you have to be able to have the power in your lower half to take on people getting into your pads, while also having the foot quickness to make up for the ground that you otherwise don't get by having longer arms. Basically, it reduces your margin for error. It's a much more detailed conversation than that, but that suffices for now. Regardless of the discrepancy, even Campbell's Pro Day measurements would still be poor relative to other tackles, and the people who have problems with it argue that it shows up on tape in the ways that we just discussed, in that Campbell struggles to make first meaningful contact with pass rushers and struggles to recover ground when beaten both to the outside or the inside. Those people argue that because of these issues, Campbell remains an elite guard prospect, but is only an okay tackle prospect, so it makes more sense to put him at guard, where he hypothetically has higher upside. But many have pushed back, including Campbell himself, who is questioning why, after all of this time being at offensive tackle 1 and considered a top 5 pick in this draft, does one measurable change how good he is as a player or change his position entirely? Field Yates also reported that, in talking to other evaluators, they really weren't concerned with his length, and they didn't think it showed up on tape, as Campbell was a shutdown player as a tackle this year. In looking at both sides, my opinion is that the tackle guard debate and the weight put on Campbell's arm length in that discussion is based on how the individual evaluator sees Campbell's foot speed. I've seen many say that he has high-level foot speed, and have seen some raise questions about his foot speed. Those that think that he has great lateral quickness aren't really concerned about the arm length because they trust that he'll be able to stick in front of defenders. But those that think that his feet are too slow are more concerned with the arm length because the combination of slow feet and short arms would lessen his area of influence, making it difficult to consistently stay in front of elite pass rushers at the NFL level. That's just my own summary of why I think there's so much argument about it, but regardless, the question here for Will Campbell is how does his arm length affect his NFL future? What's his best position? Will he be one of the few offensive tackles to succeed at the NFL level with short arms like Joe Thomas and Rashawn Slater? Or will he be yet another college tackle who was never given a chance at tackle due to short arms like Peter Skoronski? According to consensus, the next Micah Parsons exists in this draft. Who is it? Oh, you know, just a 21-year-old junior who plays a hybrid of off-ball linebacker and edge and wears number 11, just like Micah Parsons. Someone specific come to mind? Well, there's actually 3 guys in this class who meet that description, and all have been called the next Micah Parsons at some point in this draft cycle. The players are Abdul Carter of Penn State, Jihad Campbell of Alabama, and Jalen Walker of Georgia. Let's talk about each, starting with Abdul Carter, a consensus top 5 pick who's often argued to be the best non-quarterback in this draft class outside of Travis Hunter. In his 2 seasons at Penn State prior to 2024, Carter had played almost 1,000 snaps as an off-ball linebacker and only played 100 snaps on the defensive line. This is actually very similar to Micah Parsons, who played 1,007 snaps at linebacker and 82 snaps on the defensive line in college. But unlike Parsons, who opted out of his junior season due to COVID and then declared for the draft, Abdul Carter would make the switch to edge rusher in 2024, playing 642 snaps on the defensive line and only 90 as a linebacker. Despite having practically no experience playing edge rusher, Abdul Carter was dominant rushing the passer. Carter had 12 sacks, a 92.4 pass rush grade, which was first in the nation, 66 pressures, which was second in the nation, and 43 defensive stops, which was also second in the nation. Despite being raw due to the lack of experience, he showed the upside to be an elite edge defender in the NFL once he has more time on task. Specifically, he has elite get-off to threaten to win the corner, and the bend to flatten his angle back to the quarterback, the explosive short area quickness to cross the face of offensive linemen and penetrate gaps, the straight line speed to track down quarterbacks and running backs, and surprising effectiveness with pass rush moves for how little experience he has as a full-time pass rusher. Watching Carter play edge this year was basically what many expected if we got to watch Micah Parsons make the position switch in college instead of waiting until he got to the NFL. And now you can see why Carter is projected as a top 3 pick. The NFL is not going to let another off-ball linebacker converted to edge from Penn State, who wears number 11, fall outside the top 3 picks again. So, will he follow in the footsteps of Parsons to become one of the league's best edge rushers? There's currently some concern about a foot injury that he chose not to have surgery on, his lack of refinement as a pass rusher, and his lack of a power profile, but none of these concerns have kept him out of the talk as one of the few blue-chip prospects in this class. So with our introduction to Micah Parsons number 1, we move to Micah Parsons number 2, Jalen Walker, who's top 12 on the consensus board and is often mocked to the Panthers at number 8, but consensus opinions vary pretty widely on him. Unlike Abdul Carter and Micah Parsons, who played 2 seasons at off-ball linebacker, Walker has never really had a position in college and actually didn't even start his first college football game until this past season. From 2022 to 2023, Walker played 217 snaps on the defensive line and 142 snaps at linebacker. Of those snaps, he rushed the passer on 188 of them and split the other half of the snaps between playing run D and dropping into coverage. So pretty much, Walker was a rotational pass rusher that Georgia would drop into coverage occasionally or rotate into off-ball linebacker. This past season, he was aligned more as a linebacker, playing 249 snaps on the defensive line and about 370 at linebacker. Of those snaps, only 195 of them were pass rushing, while the other 400 or so were in run defense or pass coverage. But despite having so few snaps, Walker racked up 60 combined tackles, 6.5 sacks, 34 total pressures, 2 pass deflections, and 11 TFLs, showing that although he was a man without a position, he could be used in a variety of different roles. But there are certainly questions. Walker has played under 1,000 career snaps and has never consistently started at any one position. Many scouts argue that this shows in his tape as he doesn't have the pass rush moveset or ability to anchor in the run game of a full-time edge, but he doesn't have the instincts in coverage or run defense to consistently play off-ball linebacker. Many scouts further point to his size as being a concern. At 6'1", 243, he'd be in the 3rd percentile for edge rushers for height and the 7th percentile for weight. His 32-inch arms would also be in the 7th percentile. But let's walk this back for a second, because not just anyone gets mentioned in the same breath as Micah Parsons. What Walker lacks in experience, size, and refinement, he makes up for it in athleticism, character, and upside. Walker is an explosive, twitchy athlete, which shows in his pursuit speed as a linebacker and ability to win the edge as a pass rusher. He's also gotten amazing character reviews coming out of Georgia, being widely considered one of the best leaders in the program's history, which says a lot, considering, it's Georgia. Although if I had one complaint about his leadership regime, I'd probably say he should have made a heavier push towards getting his teammates to rent an Uber every once in a while, but I digress. With his athleticism, character, and work ethic, his upside to be an elite pass rusher who also has the ability to spy the quarterback or drop into coverage with tight ends or running backs is extremely valuable to the defense. As one of the youngest players in this draft, he has plenty of time to develop the instincts and technique that go with each position, giving him the upside to be the next Micah Parsons. But that's if Micah Parsons number 3 doesn't steal the crown from him, and that guy is Jihad Campbell of Alabama. What is actually really nuts about Campbell is that he's been getting compared to Micah Parsons before he even started his collegiate career. Look at this 247 Sports tweet from 2022, and those conversations have continued until 2025, where many consensus scouts believe that he is the best bet of these 3 to have a Micah Parsons trajectory. Unlike Carter, who started as an off-ball linebacker and is now an edge, or Jalen Walker, who never really had a set position, Campbell was initially recruited as an edge rusher, but has been an off-ball linebacker the entirety entirety of his career at Alabama, playing about 1,100 snaps at linebacker and only 156 on the defensive line over 3 years. Of his total snaps, he's only rushed the passer on 159 of them. But Campbell has shown that he's an all-around impact player, making 117 tackles, 12 TFLs, 5 sacks, 1 interception, 2 pass deflections, and 2 forced fumbles, while earning a 13.1 pass rush win rate and missing an extremely low number of tackles. Similar to Jalen Walker, the belief is that Campbell's best football is still ahead of him. Some think that's at edge, others at off-ball linebacker, but regardless, he has the incredible athleticism and twitch to win as a pass rusher or to chase down ball carriers, and he's also 2 inches taller than Jalen Walker. According to consensus, he struggles in similar ways in that he lacks the instincts and play recognition needed to play off-ball linebacker at a high level, and he's inconsistent in the run game, but the traits and versatility make him an exciting prospect regardless of where his team plays him. If it weren't for a shoulder injury that was only operated on right after the combine, he'd likely be higher on the consensus board. But even with a likelihood of rehabbing into the season, he finds himself in the top 20 and is one of these 3 guys constantly comped to Micah Parsons. So I'm sure he doesn't feel too bad about it. But that basically ends the question for all 3. Who will be the next Micah Parsons level player? If not, what position will these 3 guys wind up playing, and will they hit their ceiling?
He will be the case study for production versus tools. But in terms of sack production, it is very underwhelming for this player. But if you want to know why NFL teams are interested and why he's going to go so early, it's because of these tools.
4.5 sacks during 3 college seasons, never fully put it together. The kind of guy that might look great in the first half of the play and then does not finish.
The run stop rate of just 3.7%. 204 edges in the last decade have been charted on this. Of those 204, 1 was worse against the run than Shamar Stewart.
Here's the first thing everybody's going to talk about. Oh, production. Disruption is production. I think if we showed the top 20 gets after the quarterback, we're going to see Shamar Stewart way more than you're going to see a guy like Jalen Walker. So do we want just the sack number? Is that all we want? That makes us feel good?
You know how consensus always has concerns on late breakout type players with 1 year of high level college production because no one's really sure if they'll be able to consistently play at that level in the NFL? Well, what if I offered you a player who never broke out at the college level? Intriguing, right? No? Well, what if I told you that this very same guy was actually the most athletic edge prospect of all time, was huge, and had great arm length? And that, folks, is how you get Shamar Stewart. Maybe the most extreme example on both ends of the traits versus production question to come into the league ever, and possibly the barometer by which future elite size speed prospects with little production are to be judged by. Let's start with the good. At 6'5", 267 pounds, 80th and 60th percentile respectively, Stewart tested as an elite athlete at the combine, earning a 10 relative athletic score, the highest of all time, making him the #1 size speed edge prospect to test at the combine ever. He also had 34.25-inch arms, which is in the 80th percentile for edge rushers. Despite being a raw pass rusher, this elite and rare combination of size, athleticism, and length gives him the potential to be one of the best edge rushers in the NFL if he could put it all together, which is why Stewart currently finds himself in the top 15 on the consensus big board after rising consistently all season. But there are definitely concerns. It's almost impossible to hear a breakdown of Stewart that doesn't include some discussion about his production, whether that be dismissing its importance or emphasizing it as a huge question mark in his profile. In 3 years of college football, over the course of almost 700 pass rushing snaps, Shamar Stewart managed 4.5 total sacks, getting exactly 1.5 sacks each season. The rest of his stats over that time period weren't really good either. He only had 65 tackles, 12 TFLs, 4 pass deflections, and a forced fumble. Let's put this into some more perspective and compare his college production to 3 players who had similar questions coming out: Rashawn Gary, Trayvon Walker, and Danielle Hunter. Rashawn Gary, once called the poster prospect for the traits over production scouting motto, was an elite tester, earning a 9.95 RAS score. But in college, he failed to convert that athleticism into production, only getting 10.5 sacks as a pass rusher, along with 136 tackles and 25 TFLs. Travon Walker was even more of an elite athlete, earning a 9.99 RAS score, but he only managed 9.5 sacks in his 3-year college career, alongside 65 tackles and 13 TFLs. Danielle Hunter, the face of the athletic college underachiever turned NFL star type mold, earned a 9.88 RAS score and managed only 4.5 sacks along with 142 tackles and 21 TFLs. When compared to these three guys, Stewart's college production looks very concerning, and you could see why he's such an extreme now. He's a better athlete than all three of them, but pretty much had the lowest point of these combined stats, equaling Walker's total number of tackles and Hunter's number of sacks, while being last in tackles for loss out of all of them. But this question was the one that I was the most excited to talk about in this video, because it allows me to play into what I think I do best on this channel, spending way too much time diving very deeply into something when I could have just moved on, just to give you guys like 2 new rate-based stats that you haven't heard anyone else quote, to give you slightly more context that you probably could have lived without, but it's nice to know. If you appreciate that, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as I'm known to be compulsive, and no matter how hard she tries, my therapist can't change me. Now, to the fun part. The PFF stats on their own are as follows. Of 151 qualifying players, Stewart's 39 pressures was tied for 39th, his 7.1 pass rush productivity grade was 89th, and his 12.4 pass rush win rate was 71st. But pressures have been a hot talking point on this subject, so I wanted to see how to interpret this by comparing his opportunities and production to other players in college football. Stewart was given 315 pass rushing snaps in 12 games in 2024, giving him an average of 26.2 pass rush snaps per game, the 77th highest rate of pass rushing snaps per game, which doesn't sound high, but that's out of 2,795 players. If we limit the amount of qualifiers to only the top 250 players in terms of pass rush snaps as a whole, he moves to 70th in terms of his pass rush snaps per game. This means that for pass rush snaps per game, he's in the 30th percentile, over players like Abdul Carter, who had 21.9 pass rush snaps per game, James Pierce Jr., Braden Swinson, Prince Amon Mielen, and Jack Sawyer. If we then cut down the sample size to just edge rushers with at least 250 pass rush snaps and 19 pass rush snaps per game played, we get 245 qualifiers. With 39 pressures in these 315 snaps, he averages 1 pressure about every 8.08 snaps. That snap per pressure rate puts him at 56 of 245, which is in the top quartile in terms of pressure rate in college football. This ranking was much higher than I expected it to be, but you have to remember what the actual exercise is. It's comparing Stewart to every other college football player who meets the criteria, not first-round talent. When you look where other first-round prospects are on the board, it doesn't look as good for Stewart. For example, at first is James Pierce, who had 4.62 snaps per pressure. In 6th was Abdul Carter, who had 5.3 snaps per pressure. In 12th was Mike Green, who had 6 snaps per pressure, and 26th was Donovan Ezeraku, who had 7.13 snaps per pressure. So, what did we learn? Nothing. It shows us what we already knew. Shamar Stewart wasn't a high-level producer at the college level. Did I need to do all of that? Couldn't I have just left it at the comparison to Gary, Walker, and Hunter and just summed it up all real nice? Yep, but with this new information under our belt, I'm excited to learn the answer to one of the top consensus storylines of this draft. Can Stewart show that traits are really more valuable than production? Outside of the number 1 player at both edge and defensive linemen, Abdul Carter and Mason Graham respectively, there are some pretty significant questions about the other guys, even if they do have a lot of upside. This is especially true for what I'd like to call the 3 horsemen of defensive line character concerns: Marshall edge Mike Green, Tennessee edge James Pierce Jr., and Ole Miss defensive lineman Walter Nolan. Before we dive in, it goes without saying that I don't know any of these guys personally, and I can't substantiate any of the alleged character concerns or provide you with all of the context as much as I may want to. However, you'll hardly hear an analyst speak about these guys without some kind of reference to their supposed character concerns, so it is a storyline nonetheless. We start with Marshall edge rusher Mike Green, who is considered one of the best edge rushers in this draft due to his elite first step quickness, good bag of pass rush moves, and violent high effort play style. This past season, Green led the FBS with 17 sacks, ranked 2nd with 22.5 TFLs, ranked 1st with a 92.4 PFF run D grade, ranked 6th with a 91.4 pass rush grade, and was 1st in the nation with 49 defensive stops. In the days of NIL, where it seems like small school prospects often transfer away to bigger schools, we had a top 10 projected pick before our eyes coming out of Marshall. So after watching the tape and seeing the production, it was very easy to root for him, and it was a great story. Until it wasn't. As more people noticed his play and Green got more popularity, the details of his past became uncovered. In short, Green was alleged to have committed an assault in high school, signed a no-tolerance policy with Virginia, and then was again alleged to have committed a second assault shortly thereafter, leading to him being suspended. Green addressed these allegations, denied any wrongdoing, and as far as I know, he was not actually charged with anything in connection with either incident. I can't really say much more than that, because unfortunately, we just don't have any more details, nor are we entitled to them. The only thing that we know is that we don't know enough, and when that's the case, it's best to stop talking about it. So I will. So let's talk about James Pierce Jr., the Edge 1 coming into the year, who has gradually slipped down position rankings and the draft boards as a whole. With Pierce's combination of elite athleticism, elite college production, and way more strength than you would expect for his frame, consensus believes that he has the upside to be an all-pro caliber pass rusher. However, there are some serious concerns with Pierce related to his maturity and work ethic, so much so that teams are actually taking him off their boards entirely. Unlike Mike Green, it's not about actual criminal charges, and it doesn't seem like it's about how he treats others either. I can't say for sure, but in all of the podcasts I've listened to and the articles I've read, I can't remember a single mention of him being a bad guy or a jerk or anything like that. But what I have read and heard is that the concerns boil down to his work ethic, practice habits, and determination to be great. In Bob McGinn's article, he indicated that members of Tennessee staff said that if they went to the NFL, they wouldn't bring him with them, pointing to the fact that while the team would be working out, Pierce would be missing in action. An anonymous opposing coach further said that Pierce looked like he wanted no part of setting the edge and stopping the run, allowing his team to easily neutralize Pierce's impact in the run game. In Dane Brugler's draft guide, he quoted an NFL scout who said, quote, "I want to be convinced that he loves this," end quote. Although less specific, further questions have been raised about his coachability and lack of maturity in general, which I would imagine is tied to examples we already discussed and other things that we just don't know about. Will these concerns cause him to fall out of the first round, and will it affect his NFL career? Lastly, we'll move to Walter Nolen, another one who allegedly has character concerns. To be straight up with you, I spent forever looking, and I can't find a single specific thing anyone has said about him. I'm not the only one looking to see if this is bullshit or not either. This article, for example, points to the fact that there's a lack of proof, and Hail Mary Sports, a great channel on YouTube that you should follow, also sent out a tweet asking anyone if there was any actual reports, likely trying to get information like I was as well. Nope. Over and over again, I just keep seeing very vague mentions of character concerns. This article says that the concerns, quote, center around his presence or lack thereof as a teammate and dependability as a person and player, end quote. But that doesn't tell me anything specific. It's not like James Pierce's character concerns, where supposedly he wasn't showing up to practice, or where opposing coaches were saying they could completely neutralize one aspect of his game, or where NFL scouts were saying that they didn't think that he loved it. For Nolen's quote, I have no idea who said it and what they're talking about. Nelson Thielen of ZoneCoverage.com found essentially the exact same thing that I did, which is that, when talking about his character, the thing people mostly point to is the fact that he's gone to 7 schools in 6 years. I think Thielen does an excellent job discussing this, because he notes that, yeah, sometimes that's a problem. There are definitely people that can't stick around in one friend group or at a job or something because they're always causing trouble. But Thielen, along with Dane Brugler, provides some important context. Nolen first transferred out of his original school to go to a better football school in IMG Academy, which if you don't know is notorious for building future NFL prospects. If you're a prospect and you get an opportunity to go there, you're transferring. But while he was there, the pandemic hit and he transferred back to a different school to be closer to home and then transferred another time due to a coaching change. Although he originally committed to Texas A&M, Jimbo Fisher was fired after his first year, so he transferred to Ole Miss, which was also located in his home state. Okay, so yeah, it's definitely weird that he transferred a bunch of times, and maybe there aren't perfect explanations for every single one, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there are character concerns, and we don't really have anything specific to point to. So, it's in this video because it remains a talking point. It's pretty rare that I see a breakdown where they don't discuss some type of concerns related to his character, but I don't know if they exist. So I guess that begs the question. Do these concerns even exist, and people are afraid to be specific, or do they not exist? If they do exist, will they have any impact on his draft stock and his NFL career? Another big talking point about this year's draft is about some significant injuries to the top defensive backs. Using the Wayback Machine to look at the cornerback rankings during the college football season, you'll see that, after Travis Hunter, the 3 top corners were as follows. Will Johnson of Michigan, Shavon Ravel of East Carolina, and Benjamin Morrison of Notre Dame. All three of these players suffered an injury during the college football season, and, for that reason, have generally fallen out of their top spots on the consensus board. For Michigan's Will Johnson, his concern is not so much one injury, but the totality of his injuries as a whole and the effect that it might have on his game. Even when healthy, consensus scouts have concerns about Johnson's lung speed, which only becomes worse if he's hampered by injuries, which he has been for the last 2 seasons now. Johnson missed the first 3 games of his 2023 season after having knee surgery, and although he went on to have an incredible year afterwards, in 2024 he injured his shoulder in week 3, causing him to miss some time. Then he suffered a turf toe injury in October that caused him to miss the rest of the year. Then, while training for Michigan's Pro Day, Johnson recently suffered a hamstring injury, forcing him to pull out, resulting in teams not having any testing numbers on him. On top of the concerns about his injuries, many scouts said that they just didn't think that his 2024 tape showed the same guy, leading some to believe that he may have been playing banged up with undisclosed injuries, or that he just wasn't as good of a player as he showed in 2023. Ultimately, we don't know for now, but it is a talking point that we need to revisit. East Carolina cornerback Shavon Ravel is often compared to Antonio Cromartie because of his rare combination of size, speed, and hip fluidity, making him an intriguing prospect. Also, just like Antonio Cromartie, in his final year, Ravel tore his ACL during practice, requiring surgery and causing him to miss a significant amount of time. For Cromartie, this only caused him to fall to the 19th overall pick, but for Ravel, this could be a more significant fall for a few reasons. First, because of when the injury was suffered. Unlike Cromartie, Ravel suffered his injury during the season and was unable to test at his pro day outside of the bench press. Second, Ravel's playing at East Carolina, not Florida State, so there are of course concerns as to whether Ravel can make the significant jump to the NFL level. And third, with only 1 year as a starter prior to the ACL tear, there are further concerns with Ravel's lack of experience playing at the position in general. To be fair to Ravel, in his 15 college starts, he was dominant when he played, allowing only 27 receptions on 63 targets, a completion percentage of 42%, 3 interceptions, and 15 PBUs. As a small school guy with exciting traits and elite production, he's very easy to root for. But the question is, how far will his injury cause him to drop down draft boards, and will he be able to make the jump in competition to the NFL? Notre Dame's Benjamin Morrison has maybe the most concerning injury of all, a hip. Not only did he injure his hip, but this most recent hip injury actually makes 2 separate hip surgeries in 4 years. This can be devastating to a cornerback. One of the first things a scout looks for when watching corners is their hip fluidity to open up and transition upfield, to transition laterally with a receiver, or to click and close underneath. With stiff hips, corners lose a step in transition in all phases, giving them less margin for error even when they're already in step with the receiver, and also just making it harder to mirror a wide receiver's route in the first place. For a player like Morrison, whose upside is based on the combination of his technique and his athleticism, any issues recovering from his second hip injury, or any chance of having a third hip injury, could lead to concerning results for his career and the team that drafts him. But without the injury, because of his technique and athleticism, he's seen as a player who easily could have been taken in the first round otherwise. Will he be the same player after returning from his hip injury? Before we get to our quick hitters section, I want to talk about some consensus sleepers, starting with this Benson Boone looking motherfucker, Lan Larison, a running back from UC Davis. His stats are a beautiful thing that he's got. In 2024, Larison had 2,387 all-purpose yards, 1,465 rushing, and 874 receiving, alongside 23 touchdowns, 17 rushing, and 6 receiving. Despite playing in the FCS, Larison is a legit NFL prospect due to how absolutely dominant he was and his all-around skill set as a running back and receiver. He's a sleeper due to his low level of competition and questions about how it'll translate, but he's an exciting player to watch. We also have David Walker out of Central Arkansas, the winner of the Buck Buchanan Award for the top FCS defender in 2024, after finishing the year with 55 pressures, 23 TFLs, 12 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, and 41 quarterback hurries. He has 31 sacks and 63 TFLs over 3 seasons, but it is of course a question as to whether he could do the same at the NFL level. Next is wide receiver Nick Nash of San Jose State, who is number 1 in receiving yards amongst wide receivers and number 2 total with 1,382 yards. He also led the nation in touchdowns with 16. Nash has played 6 years in college football, 3 as a quarterback, and then 3 years as a receiver. So although he's an older prospect, he's still pretty new to the position, but it's hard to overlook his massive production. Lastly is Buffalo linebacker Sean Dolak. Although undersized and playing at a low level of competition, Dolak plays with his hair on fire, leading to a monster 2024 campaign with 82 tackles, 19 TFLs, and 5 interceptions, resulting in being named the 2024 MAC Defensive Player of the Year and a first-team All-American. Our last section is quick hitters. I really wanted to dive more deeply into a lot of these, but unfortunately I would have never been able to get this video out if I did. At the time of writing, it's still arguable about whether or not I'll be able to get this video out in a good amount of time, so I apologize in advance for not being able to dive as deeply into the questions as I did last year. I really think last year's video is actually one of my best videos on this channel, but I'm still working to find the best way to organize these biggest questions and top storylines of the draft type videos to balance out how many topics I can actually hit and the depth at which I hit them. So if you have any suggestions, I'd really love to hear. Anyways, let's talk about some quick hitters. I'm going to talk about some of them out loud, but otherwise some of them might just be written down, so feel free to read them as well. Despite being a great route runner with elite 4.36 speed, Georgia wide receiver Arian Smith has possibly the worst hands of any receiver prospect with 10 drops in 2024. Can he fix his hands? Can J.J. Pegues, the two-way player at fullback and defensive lineman for Ole Miss, make a Travis Hunter-like impact on both sides of the ball? Alabama edge rusher Quandarius Robinson is maybe the most inexperienced player at the edge rusher position to ever enter the draft with only 370 total defensive snaps in his career. But he was an absolute monster when he did play, earning a 24% pass rush win rate and a 90.3 pass rush grade. Will he be able to develop into a dominant edge rusher with more experience? A player I love in this draft, Iowa State cornerback Darian Porter, has absolutely bonkers stats from 2024. He allowed a passer rating of 4.7 against him, allowed 5 receptions on 17 targets for 70 yards on 203 coverage snaps, a reception percentage of 29.4, which was the best in the nation amongst DBs with at least 168 coverage snaps. With 5 PBUs, he had the same amount of PBUs as receptions allowed, he had a 90.1 PFF grade, and his RAS of 9.99 was 4th all-time for cornerback. So why is he not hyped up more? Because he's a 24-year-old who played 6 years in college and didn't start until his very last season. Even then, he only played 367 career coverage snaps, which is an extremely small sample size for a player who's much older. But is he potentially a diamond in the rough? Will linebacker Chris Paul of Ole Miss and cornerback Kobe Bryant of Kansas team up to create the Lakers duo that never was? Tennessee defensive lineman Omar Norman Lott led interior defensive linemen with an 18.9% pass rush win rate, but only played about 17 snaps per game. Can he develop the skill set to be a full-time starter at the NFL level? And if he doesn't, can he at least carve out a role as a rotational pass rusher? Oregon wide receiver Tez Johnson, who is in the 9th percentile for height at 5'9" and the 0th percentile for weight at 154 pounds, ran a 4.51 40-yard dash, which is pretty terrible for a guy whose game is premised on speed. But many argue that he's much faster on the field. Miami wide receiver Xavier Restrepo, also at 5'9" but much heavier, ran an atrocious 4.8 40-yard dash at his pro day, although he says he hurt his hamstring. There are questions as to both of these undersized wide receivers as to whether they'll be able to make it at the NFL level with their size, but also as to whether their on-field speed is better than their testing numbers. Tyler Shook is on some boards as high as quarterback 3. He's played a whopping 7 years in college football. Seriously, he was Justin Herbert's backup at Oregon, but despite being 26 years old, he's a pretty raw player due to missing a significant amount of time in college due to injuries. Can he stay healthy at the NFL level and develop to one day become a starter or quality backup? And with that, we've cemented the top storylines and biggest questions going into the draft so that we can revisit them later. This has been another really fun draft cycle, and I'm super excited to revisit these questions in the future. Speaking of, it's almost time to revisit the biggest questions of 2023, as we're starting to get a little bit more clarity. If you want to check out the biggest questions from last year's draft, make sure to check out that video, because we'll be revisiting that one down the line as well. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe, as it helps to grow the community here. Plus, once the draft is over, we'll of course be discussing the biggest consensus reaches and fallers as we've done the past 2 years now. I'd love to hear anything you have to say about any player in this draft in the comments below, so make sure to let me know what you think. Otherwise, our 3rd annual draft storylines video is now complete, and I thank you again for yet another great year of talking ball with all of you. That's it for now. Later.